Shaun Haney here with RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. We're joined right now by Lauren Martin. She is Senior Director of Government Relations and Policy with the CMC, based out of Ottawa. Lauren, great to chat with you.
Shaun, always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a while. So there's lots happening right now when it comes to discussions in Canada from the federal government and honestly also in the grassroots level too about immigration. And we've heard a lot out of our current government about changes to how they're going to approach temporary foreign workers going forward. Minister Miller has been, I would say, rather aggressive in some of his use of language when it comes to how he sees industry using TFWs as a part of their operations. I got some questions for you about that. The CMC put out a press release earlier this week, clearly not happy. What specifically are you not happy about in the meat processing sector when it comes to some of the government messaging on TFWs?
Sure. Well, our news release was reacting to the changes that were announced on March 21st, so just coming up on 2 weeks ago. And those changes were with respect to two aspects. One, and probably the biggest one, the most worrisome one, is that the temporary foreign worker cap was going to be reduced from 30% to 20%. So to break that down a little bit, at this moment, those in the agri-food sector are allowed up to 30% of their labor force to be comprised of temporary foreign workers. That cap has now been reduced to 20%. That's one change, and a big one. The other change is that there is something called a labor market impact assessment, LMIA, labor market impact assessment. That's a requirement in the TFW application process. It used to be valid for 2 years, and now it is only valid for 6 months. So it does require that anyone applying for TFWs has to do that labor market impact assessment at a more frequent rate. And the third change that I would say we were disappointed by was more procedural. These two changes are coming into effect as of May 1st, 2024. So within 6 weeks of that announcement, our member companies have to pivot.
And you could probably speak for the government a little bit here, but just based on your understanding, why the urgency to that change of May 1st?
Speaking frankly, Shaun, I think it was a knee-jerk reaction, and in some of the comments that you would have come across in the media, it was a reaction to the housing crisis. So that's what they're pinning it to, and say, though, that scoping in the agri-food sector is perhaps an overblown response to the housing crisis. And the reason why I think that is because, the measures writ large and all the comments in the media are for reducing the amount of temporary residents that are in the country. Temporary foreign workers only make up 9% of that temporary resident category, and then agri-food is probably even smaller than that. So I don't think that it's going to, I think it's going to have worse impacts or worse outcomes for the agri-food sector.
Now, I guess as we look at this, we got to get an understanding here. How critical are TFWs? Like when you say 30%, we're reducing to 20%, have your member companies been operating at that 30% level and using up all of that utilization?
Some of them have, Shaun. Every single company has different recruiting strategies. Some of them rely on TFWs heavily. Some of them don't. Some of them don't rely on TFWs because of the arbitrary nature of the policies and the cumbersome process to get TFWs here. There's also provincial nomination processes, et cetera, et cetera. So every single company has a different recruiting strategy. But what is by and large absolutely true is that we are in a tight labor market. It's difficult to find Canadians to do these jobs, and often our companies are looking for immigration streams to fill those labor needs.
Lauren, that's been the premise that I think has been a little bit like, okay, we're missing the mark here. And this is, my opinion, is when I hear Minister Miller say that Canadian companies are addicted to the use of TFWs. That to me really reeks of just a misunderstanding on why this program is used and why it's there in the first place. That I think there's a miss there.
I'm not going to disagree with you. You're the one who said it first, but if I'm not going to disagree with you that it suggests to me as well a fundamental misunderstanding of the agri-food sector. A labor market impact assessment is you cannot get a TFW without having done the LMIA, and the LMIA needs to demonstrate that there is no Canadian available to do this work. So inherent in applying for a TFW, you have to demonstrate the need. So to use the word like addicted to the process, I mean, it's part of the process to demonstrate that there is no Canadian available to do this work.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I've talked to some farm groups. In particular, I did an interview with OFA, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, about some of these changes coming when it comes to TFWs and the policies. They don't seem to be concerned whatsoever. They seem to feel, and this has been the word that has been used in the mainstream media a little bit. OFA did not say that they've been told there's an exemption, but they seem to feel that they've been reassured by the government that agriculture will not be touched by this. You seem to have a different opinion representing the processors, even though it is in agricultural processing.
So there are several different ways in which, as I mentioned, companies attract foreign labor. And there is the seasonal agriculture worker program, which normally the primary ag stream goes to first. So I'm not sure if maybe that's the disconnect, but what I like, that's conjecture, Shaun. What I will say is that I don't have the same warm and fuzzies that primary agriculture has on the infallibility of this program. The conversations we've had as recently as this morning, the comments that Minister Miller has said in the media, the comments that Prime Minister Trudeau mentioned last week. Yeah, I'm not left with a lot of comfort as to the protection that they're going to have for the programs.
Okay, so give us the potential scenario here, right? You're obviously concerned, so you've done some impact analysis here too. If it goes forward as presented, these three changes that you've stated, what's the impact to your member companies?
So I think about the totality when I think about the impact. We know we've just come through the pandemic. We know about the fragility of the food supply chain. We know that our Canadian companies are burdened with regulations. We know that there's a tight labor market. We know as Canadians that there's inflation. This is just one more unhelpful policy in the path to maintaining affordable food prices.
Great stuff. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us here today on Real Agriculture, and we look forward to our next chat. I think this isn't the end of this topic, so I'm sure we're going to have lots of opportunity to break it down. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.